All right, let's dive into it. We're talking about the invisible battlefield of our time, cyberspace. It is a nonstop, high-stakes digital arms race with attackers and defenders constantly trying to outsmart each other. And honestly, knowing the rules of this game has never been more important. So, let's break down the battlefield. And that really is the perfect way to put it. This isn't just about one-off hacks. No, it's a perpetual chess match. It's all about strategy, deception, and constant innovation. Every single move by one side forces the other to come up with a countermove. It never, ever stops. You know, they say the best defense is a good offense, but in cybersecurity, the best defense really comes from knowing your enemy's offense. So if we want to build a truly unbreakable digital fortress, we have to start by thinking like the people trying to tear it down. So let's crack open their playbook. Now, attackers don't just sit around randomly clicking buttons hoping something works. No way. They follow a very structured, methodical process that's designed to give them the absolute best chance of success. It's a whole campaign, not just a single action. And this is that process. It's called the cyber kill chain, and it's a 7-stage framework that pretty much outlines the entire life cycle of a typical cyber attack. Think of it like their step-by-step project plan, taking them all the way from initial scouting right up to their final goal. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with reconnaissance. Before they even think about launching an attack, the bad guys do their homework. They use tools like Nmap, which is kind of like a digital sonar, to scan for openings, see what systems are online, and basically create a detailed map of their target's network so they can find the weakest spots. And they do this in two main ways. Passive recon is like being a spy watching from a distance, just gathering up all the publicly available information they can find. Active recon, on the other hand, is when they get hands-on. They start directly probing the target's systems to see how they react. It's the difference between looking at a building's blueprints and, actually going up and rattling the doorknobs. So after all that technical scouting, what's usually the weakest link? It's us, people. Social engineering isn't about hacking code, it's about hacking humans. It's about exploiting our natural psychology, our sense of trust or urgency or respect for authority, to trick us into just handing over the keys to the kingdom. And just how effective is this? Well, the difference is just wild. A generic phishing email, the kind they blast out to thousands of people, that might get a 3% success rate, if they're lucky. But spear phishing, where the email is meticulously crafted for one specific person, that has a jaw-dropping 70% success rate. That personal touch makes all the difference. And when these attacks do succeed, the impact can be absolutely devastating. Just look at the WannaCry ransomware attack. It spread like wildfire to 400,000 machines all over the world. And the crazy part is, it largely exploited a known vulnerability that tons of organizations just hadn't gotten around to patching. It's a brutal reminder of the catastrophic cost of ignoring the basics. Then, of course, you've got the big leagues. Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. Look, these are not your typical smash-and-grab hackers. These groups are patient, incredibly well-funded, and often backed by entire nations. They play the long game, staying hidden inside a network for months, sometimes even years, to pull off a very specific mission.
All right, so we've seen the attacker's game plan. It's pretty scary stuff. Now, let's flip the board. How do we fight back? Let's talk about the strategies for building that digital fortress.
When it comes to defense, there are really two core philosophies. First, you have defense in depth. Think of this like a medieval castle. You've got a moat, high walls, archers, and guards, all protecting the crown jewels. It's all about multiple overlapping layers of security around your most critical stuff. Then there's defense in breadth, which is about making sure a consistent, solid level of security is applied everywhere, across the whole organization. And honestly, you absolutely need both. But look, before we get into any of the fancy, high-tech strategies, you have to nail the basics. This stuff right here is the foundational security hygiene that is completely non-negotiable. Things like multi-factor authentication and keeping your systems patched. This is the bedrock of any solid defense. If you neglect these, you're basically building that fortress on sand. Now, a more modern approach that's really changing the game is something called zero trust. The philosophy behind it is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Never trust, always verify. It completely throws out the old idea of a trusted inside network. Instead, it assumes attackers are already in. So every single request to access anything has to be proven to be legitimate every single time, no matter where it's coming from. Okay, but let's be real. What happens when an attacker does get past the perimeter? The fight is far from over. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's just beginning. Now the battle moves inside the walls. So once an attacker gets that initial foothold, their first goal usually isn't to start stealing things. Nope, it's to explore. They use a technique called lateral movement to move sideways through the network, hopping from computer to computer, quietly searching for the good stuff, valuable data, powerful administrator accounts, you name it. And here's the really sneaky part. They often do this by using tools that are already built into the operating system, things like PowerShell or remote desktop that system administrators use every single day. By using legitimate tools for their dirty work, they can blend in with all the normal network traffic and avoid setting off any alarms. So how in the world do you catch someone who's trying to blend in? Well, this is where a tool like UBA comes into play. You can think of it as an AI-powered security guard. It just sits there and learns what normal behavior looks like for every single user and every device. The second something weird happens, like, say, an accountant suddenly trying to access the engineering servers at 3 in the morning, it flags it as a potential threat.
But defending the inside is made incredibly difficult because of this massive blind spot called shadow IT. We're talking about all the unapproved apps and cloud services that employees use for work without telling IT. How big's the problem? Get this. That number, 8%, is the percentage of companies that think they actually know the full scope of shadow IT in their environment. That means 92% are flying blind, and you just can't secure what you don't even know is there.
So this whole fight isn't just about technology, right? Beyond the firewalls and the AI, there's a critical layer of governance. Basically, the rules that define how security works, and maybe most importantly, the plan for what to do when those rules inevitably get broken. In today's really fast-paced world, you can't just tack security on at the end. That's where this idea of shifting left comes from. All it really means is building security into the earliest stages of the development process. You're embedding the policies directly into the code and automation so that things are secure by design, not just by accident. But look, breaches are going to happen. It's just a fact of life. An incident response plan is your playbook for when things go wrong. It's a formal 6-step process that walks your team through everything, from preparing ahead of time, to containing the threat, to recovering your systems, and all the way to what is easily the most important step, learning lessons from the incident so it doesn't happen again. And when we're talking about the cloud, there's one critical concept that trips up so many people. It's called the shared responsibility model. Here's the deal. The cloud provider, think Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they're responsible for securing the cloud itself. The hardware, the data centers, all that stuff. But you, the customer, are always responsible for securing what you put in the cloud. That's your data, your applications, and who gets to access them. So, we've seen the attacker's playbook. We've seen the defender's fortress. It is a constant back and forth evolution of tactics and technology. So the question I want to leave you with is this. In this never-ending digital arms race, what do you think is the next game-changing move that's going to completely tip the scales?